Two.
Here we go.
Greetings and welcome to a fantastic and informative show about one of my all-time favorite topics, and that is the Founders Academy Public Charter School located in Manchester, New Hampshire. My name is Maureen Mooney, and not only am I a resident here in town, but I'm also the Dean of the Founders Academy and have been since 2015. Prior to that, I was the Dean of Faculty for a year. So a subject very near and dear to my heart, and I have with me today two guests who know an incredible amount about the Founders Academy. One is Mrs. Patty Humphrey, who is a trustee currently of the school, but a founder of the school as well. My second guest is Mr. Greg VanEwyk, who is a U.S. history teacher at the school and the former chairman of the humanities department at Founders. At the end of this half hour, you'll hear a great overview as to everything you need to know about a great school that came to New Hampshire in 2014. We'll also talk about what is a charter school, where are they, what makes them unique, are they public? All of those topics in the next half of an hour with our guests, Mrs. Patty Humphrey, Mr. Greg VanEwyk. So with that introduction, I'm going to start with our first question, very basic but very interesting to know, and that is, what is a charter school? So Mrs. Humphrey, welcome. And
Thank you, Maureen. And thank you for being a great dean to the Founders Academy, our favorite subject, I believe.
thank you.
So a charter school is a public school that's been created through a process that's separate from the ordinary public school system, and in exchange for being able to have its own curriculum created by its mission and its charter, it exists at a lesser amount of tuition than regular public schools. It receives only the state portion of public school tuition and not the town portion. And there are many, many different kinds of charter schools. Anyone can start a charter school and go through the process, get it approved by the State Board of Education. It's probably a 2 to 3 year process, and with any wonderful idea that they have. So there you go.
That's great. Now tell me, how did charter schools come to New Hampshire? How did they get started here in New Hampshire?
Well, there was a state senator named Jim Rubens who decided to create a charter school law, and that was in 1995. And he took advice from a woman named Susan Hollins, who was the first person who really worked specifically in the charter school movement to make the law actually workable. And there had to be a lot of compromises made because not everybody was in favor of charter schools. And so they started rather slowly, but eventually they took up speed. And now we have about 26 or 27 charter schools in the state.
Amazing. And 3 more, I believe, opening in the fall. So charter
Yes.
schools are here, there, and everywhere. Could you highlight a few in New Hampshire and where they're located too?
Well, one of our really star charter schools is called Academy for Science and Design.
Yes.
And that was started 10 years ago. And it was, in fact, its first location was in Merrimack. And it is a STEM school. And it is Newsweek listed as the foremost school in New Hampshire. And it also has won the Blue Ribbon Prize from the U.S. Department of Education, which gives prizes to 250 high schools in the country, and the Academy for Science and Design is one of those schools.
It's amazing.
So it operates on a tiny budget. There is probably no other school of its quality in the whole country that operates on such a low budget, but they do miraculous things at that school, all with being creative and innovative in the way they approach everything.
They do a great job. Actually, several students go to that school from Merrimack. So we have several students
yes.
that commute down there.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. I know that charter schools, and I come into contact with this as well, there are a lot of misconceptions about charter schools out there. For example, several times people will come to visit us at Founders, and one of their first questions is, so what's the tuition here? Could you tell our viewers about some of the misconceptions that charter schools have?
Well, that certainly is the primary one. The marvelous news is that these wonderful schools, there are art schools, there are science schools, there are creative project schools, there are Montessori schools, there's our school, which is a Liberty school. There's huge choice, and they're free and open to every student in New Hampshire. And so that is the first misconception, is that you have to pay. Another misconception about charter schools is that they are selective in terms of their choice of enrollment, and that's not so. By law, charter schools take students on a first-come, first-served basis, and if the school fills up, then a lottery is formed for any students for which there might be openings later on.
So much to know about public charter schools in New Hampshire.
Right.
Where would be a good resource to go, say online or in Concord?
Let's see, Maureen. I can't think about that. There's a charter school organization called the Alliance, the Public Charter Schools, New Hampshire Alliance for Public Charter Schools, and their website is www.nhcharterschools.org. And that has the lists of every charter school in the state, where they are. It has the charters of every charter school, so that if you're interested in starting a school, you can read some of these charters. You can see how you present your information to the state board as you start forming your own ideas. And they list all the news nationally about charter schools, and locally. They follow the legislature and any laws that may come up for or against charter schools, always encouraging the pro side.
Right.
Yes.
And charter schools, like anything else, have their challenges, certainly. Funding, I think you'd agree with me, is probably its biggest challenge.
Well, I would agree with you, Maureen. Strangely enough.
That's right.
Because we receive about 1/3 of what regular public schools receive. That means that we cannot offer everything that a regular public school offers. For instance, if we have a high school, it probably will not have a football team, for instance. But it is amazing how creative you can be with what you do have. And one of our reasons for existing is to show that we can do more with less. So we wouldn't want to have as much, but we do want to have a consistently proportionate amount, I would say.
Exactly. So much there. Offering a school of choice. Parents can determine whether or not that's where they'd like to go with their students, and students in on that decision as well. It's just such a great benefit to New Hampshire. You yourself have been so involved, not only in the Founders Academy Public Charter School, but also with charter schools in general in New Hampshire. Would you mind just saying a little bit to our viewers about what your involvement has been, both with Founders and charter schools?
Well, when the charter school law first came about, my husband said to me, let's start charter schools in New Hampshire. That will be our gift to the state. And he couldn't have asked a better person, if I do say so myself.
Yes.
I thought it was a terrific idea, and I went with it. And so we started a little foundation, and we hired Susan Hollins, who had been a school superintendent and was very knowledgeable about public education. And really, she did a lot of the early work, encouraging people that came to us. We had seminars all over the state just saying, here we are, here's what charter schools are. If you have any ideas, come to us and we'll help you through the process. So that's how we got started. Then it became kind of fun to think about starting a school or two myself. And so I did a little bit of that too. But most of the schools have been started with some group or person that had an idea they were passionate about, that wanted to do education in a somewhat different way than the standard approach. And so we have a huge variety of charter schools. I'm very, very proud of that. There's no cookie cutter charter schools here. Everyone is started by somebody who had a dream.
Well, on behalf of all of the students who have truly benefited from charter schools in New Hampshire, thank you for all you've done. Your involvement and your generosity has been unmatched. Let's switch now to Founders, knowing that background about charter schools in New Hampshire, the Founders Academy. Now, you, Patty, being a founder of Founders Academy, what is the mission and how did it get started?
So I watch television and I see these men on the street interviews, who was the first president of the United States, that kind of thing, and people not knowing. And I was hearing that the big educational testing companies were eliminating American history from their tests, and therefore the schools weren't even interested in teaching it because they wanted high marks on their tests, and history didn't count anymore. And that we were developing citizens that didn't know anything about our country, and that in fact we could probably lose our liberty, lose our democracy, lose our country if something weren't done. So that's what was the impetus of getting started.
Oh, such a great mission. And one reason why I got involved too is because of that mission, how important it is to have a school emphasizing character building, history, leadership, and liberty. So Mr. VanEwyk, as a teacher at Founders Academy, tell me, what's your general overview of Founders? What would you say to someone who had never come into contact with Founders Academy before?
So thank you for having me here today. Happy to be with you and Patty. And I'll add on to what she said about charter schools in general and the Founders Academy. She had this fear that history was kind of going away. And I'll tell you, I saw that myself too. I had been in public schools in 2 states, both in New Hampshire and in Georgia,
yep,
and had seen this kind of nationwide movement that was emphasizing math and English, and I think those are both very important subject areas, but it resulted also in a loss in the value of history.
Right.
And certainly in the United States, where our citizens are participants in our government, and it is based on citizens having information. It is just vitally important, I think, that we do focus on character and on history so that our children today, who will be participants in democracy in the next generation, will be able to participate in an informed way.
Exactly.
So yes, I think that the Founders Academy is definitely a step in the right direction, not to mention giving families, the kids with their parents, an opportunity to look and see what kind of education do I want my students to have, and charter schools in general allow that to happen as well.
Exactly. Now, the Founders Academy, just so our viewers know, goes from grades 6 through 12. Opening up the 12th grade this year. It's our 5th year of existence, which is amazing. It's a celebratory year. Our high school is now complete. In terms of general facts about Founders, how many communities send children to Founders?
So we have currently, I think, 24 communities, towns around New Hampshire that are currently represented at the Founders Academy. And again, another misconception maybe about charter schools is who is allowed to attend each one. And they're open to every child who lives in the state of New Hampshire,
yes,
and that allows us to serve so many different communities.
So it's amazing that who can attend, and that is not just people who live in Manchester,
right,
but anyone in New Hampshire can attend for free, as with any other public school.
Indeed.
So now leadership is a huge theme at Founders Academy. The founders were instrumental in making that foremost, always letting the students take a lead, learn to be leaders. How has that been done throughout the curriculum at Founders?
Sure. So one of the really fascinating things about charter schools is the freedom that is allowed for